Welcome to the Director's Cut with East Lansing Public Library's Director, Kristen Shelley.
Welcome to the Director's Cut podcast. I am Kristen Shelley, Director of the East Lansing Public Library. The library enriches, connects, and transforms lives through knowledge and innovation. In this new podcast, we will have conversations with various leaders who have made a difference in their communities. Our guest today is John Wagner, author, photographer, and pilot of the Michigan Lighthouses series. John began the series in 1985 as a photographic interest. In 1989, the concept of a book unfolded. To prepare for publication, further photographic work to include all of Michigan's lighthouses was necessary. The first printing of the book, Michigan Lighthouses, an Aerial Photographic Perspective, occurred in January 1994 and was sold out by November 1996. John is also a resident of East Lansing. John, welcome to the Director's Cut.
Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. Your book is beautiful. The photography is absolutely stunning. And I'm curious, what drew you to lighthouses? I mean, aside from Michigan having so many of them, what was it about lighthouses that drew you to want to photograph them, but also, fly above them?
I do cover that in the first opening introduction of the book as to how it sort of took place. I guess the combination of my experience in the aviation industry, flying some 9,000 hours, having run a camera since I was a teenager, and the opportunity to observe lighthouses from a different perspective sort of led me into it.
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely. I mean, I've been to lighthouses from the ground and then from the water side and seen them, but never, obviously, above, looking from above down below. And this gives all of your readers of the book that possibility. I do occasionally get that question. Somebody will show me a picture and say, "What lighthouse is this?" And I will say, "I don't recognize it from the ground." That's probably a hazard, right?
Yes.
So the last reprint of the book was in July 1998.
Correct.
Has your interest in lighthouses expanded beyond Michigan, or have you always been interested in lighthouses other than Michigan?
I have photographed beyond Michigan all of the Great Lakes with the exception of southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, and also Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island.
Lovely. I grew up our family vacationed in Tofte, Minnesota as a child, and Split Rock Lighthouse is up there. And I just remember when I would see it, I was like, oh, we're almost to the cabins. So it's a beautiful lighthouse that jets out into Lake Superior.
And Split Rock is one of 5 lighthouses on the Great Lakes that has the second order Fresnel lens, which that is the second largest lens produced. And 4 of them are in Michigan waters. And then the 5th one is at Split Rock.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I read that last night, and I thought, I wonder where the 5th one is. And there it is in Minnesota. So do you have a favorite lighthouse?
Well, I suppose White Shoal. That's the one that's on the front cover of the book. And it is sort of an iconic lighthouse for the state of Michigan. And, back a number of years ago, I donated that image to the Secretary of State's office to use on the specialty license plates. And it, I understand, has raised about $2.5 million for the maintenance and restoration of lighthouses around Michigan. And out of all the strange things, they replaced it with a nondescript structure that has nothing to do with anything in the state of Michigan. Rather disturbing, but I have no explanation as to why.
I did want to ask you about that because many of the lighthouses, not only in Michigan, but across the country, are in disrepair and are not being renovated and taken care of. Are they being replaced with just like simple poles with lights on them? I mean, to be very simplistic, but...
Well, there are a number of them that have been auctioned off by the GSA and have been deemed surplus to the needs of the navigation and Coast Guard. And in fact, White Shoal, I just shipped a box of books up to White Shoal Lighthouse. A fellow by the name of Brent Tomlinson credits my book as a teenager to interest him in lighthouses. And he, about a year or so ago, acquired the White Shoal Lighthouse through the GSA. And now they're in a major restoration effort.
Is he going to use it for like private use or?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
There are a number that once they are rehabilitated, do invite people to come out and stay. Mostly they work,
Right,
but that,
right.
they have an opportunity to live at the lighthouse for a weekend or a week or whatever it may be.
Yeah, just amazing. And I was struck with the different architecture or the different styles of lighthouses just in Michigan or just in Michigan waters. And they were built, from the early 1800s to 1900s. And I just wondered if you would talk a little bit about the different styles.
Well, there certainly are a number of different structures that have been used. Now, there are some that have been duplicated. They may be positioned in a different location on the end of a wharf or, for example, offshore. And I say an identical design. But there are many different types. Probably one that is rather prominent is the Sand Hills Lighthouse up on the Keweenaw Peninsula, which today is a bed and breakfast. I contrast that when I mentioned Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island. I met Bill Younger out in Halifax in about 1969, I think it was, and we flew all of Nova Scotia. And the Canadians put together lighthouses. They almost look like a dozen sheets of plywood with a light on the top. And in fact, we had a little acronym. We used to fly up on one and we'd say another CCL, a Canadian Cracker Box Lighthouse. So pardon my expression here to my Canadian friends, but there is a vast array of designs. Even Big Bay is one. That's a bed and breakfast today. It's a brick structure. And it certainly is different.
Well, and your book, Michigan Lighthouses, is, as I said, fascinating and truly beautiful photographs. And I marveled at how some were constructed, as I said, in the 1800s and 1900s, and yet they're still standing through horrific weather, horrific storms. And I mean, there they are. They're standing. And we can't even build homes that have lasted that long necessarily.
Well,
so
they were pretty substantial structures when you consider they had to survive the storms of Lake Superior, for example. Spectacle Reef, interesting structure. The stone from that came from Marblehead, a quarry in Marblehead, Ohio. The pieces were all cut and assembled, and then they were disassembled and numbered and then transported into Upper Lake Huron, about 25 miles offshore and northeast of Sheboygan, and then reassembled up there. That whole operation took 4 years to complete.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, what is the average length of having to build of building a lighthouse back then? I mean,
well, I'm not sure. I suppose the more difficult ones you mentioned, Split Rock. Yes, the first year at Split Rock was spent lifting all the material from the water level via boat up to the top of the ridge, which is, 100 or 100 feet or more above, because there were no roads that went there.
Absolutely, right.
And so the whole first year was spent doing that.
Right, amazing. And, I kind of find lighthouses as majestic in a way. They're kind of sentinels out in the water. Some of these lighthouses are literally on a tiny patch of rock and built up, and they're desolate. So are they still taken care of? Are people still staffing them?
Well, yes. The various nonprofit groups that have undertaken the maintenance and restoration of lighthouses, there are an increasing number all the time around the state. Port Austin Reef is one. They've been working on that for 20 years. One of the notable examples of a great restoration project was Detour Reef up around Drummond Island. I just mentioned that White Shoal has been recently purchased. Spectacle Reef is another lighthouse that's been purchased. And some of the major restoration efforts involve cleaning out the structure. Plywood has fallen off the walls, plasterboard. Birds have gotten in. I love to have written a little article in the book about burning the tennies, it's called. It's the Port Austin Lighthouse group, And they all got together and related the tale about the restoration work and so forth. And at the tail end, when they finally had it closed and kept the birds out, they all had tennis shoes, and they lighted a bonfire and all threw the tennis shoes into the bonfire because they couldn't wear them anyplace else. They were so stinko from dead birds and cormorants and so forth. So,
And you do talk a little bit in the book at the beginning about vandals, and that the deterioration isn't necessarily just weather or just old age, but vandals have gone in. And I believe one of them they started a fire at.
Yeah. A 14-mile point, started a fire, burned all the wood structure out of it. They started a fire in St. Helena Island up on the second level, and it burned a hole in the floor 18 or 20 inches across. And apparently went out, never caught. And then vandals also had a great deal to do with the Charity Island Lighthouse. The story sort of was that I have a picture that the board on the side of the structure was about as high as people could reach, and they tore the boards off to build bonfires while they were inhabiting the island. So some of the destruction that's gone on is just incomprehensible.
Absolutely. And I know it took you at least 7 years.
6.5 years.
6.5 years to take the photographs, to write the book, to put it all together, to have it bound. Do you want to talk at all about that process or about things within the book?
Well, I could make things, try to make a quick story out of it. The book, of course, was self-published, and that has many aspects to it. I had to arrange financing with Old Kent Bank. This book was a $237,000 project, and that was just the direct expense, not the flying or the gasoline or anything else. And when you self-publish a book, I had to write a prospectus for the bank to the Old Kent decided to do it. Co-America didn't want anything to do with it. We interviewed 5 different printers, 2 different binderies, and we were responsible for selecting the paper that went into the book. And then, of course, the paper had to be shipped from the mill to the printer. And the first printer was St. Louis, Missouri, Color Associates. The second printing was done by Superior Color in Kalamazoo and their sister company, Etheridge in Grand Rapids. And so that, and we were on press every time there was a press run for color checks and so forth to make certain that color was acceptable. Unfortunately, Color Associates, the first printer, shorted me 2,300 copies of the book because this book was the first book ever printed in the United States on a waterless press in 400-line screen. And the temperature of that is very critical. It's plus or minus a half degree. So that the first printing suffered a great deal of spoilage. That's just the beginning of the story. There's a lot more to it than that. But anyhow.
Are you still flying?
Oh, yes.
Oh, very good.
Yep, still on the airplane, still flying.
Excellent.
We just got back into the country here back a week or 2 ago. And so I have not been out yet, but yeah, still active flying. And I'll be 84 in July, so that means I got to keep on the treadmill so I can pass the Bruce protocol treadmill test for the FAA. Can I make 1 or 2 other quick comments? One is that there were a lot of book parts that were left over, particularly from the first printing, and I have these available for teachers. And if they want to come and pick these up at the warehouse, they can have all the parts. There are signatures, there are unbound books and so forth for their classroom. And usually March of the year is Michigan Week or something such as that for the 4th grade. Those are available. I guess I would say that if anybody is interested in buying books, of course, Partners Book Distributing, as we mentioned, is no longer in business. I live in East Lansing. If they want to pick it up, I autograph, and I designed the book on page 9 to autograph on. And again, another long story. But the other thing I've done recently, my friend, a captain with Spirit Airlines, suggested I should write an epilogue to the book and make comments on the various things that I experienced that are not in the book, but during its filming and publication. So I've done that, and I've got about 20 pages. So that will be offered to the people that buy books or, previous owners.
Absolutely. And where is the warehouse?
The warehouse is out at the airport.
And people can come directly there?
No, they'd have to contact me,
Okay.
and then we would make arrangements to meet and go to the warehouse. And there's vast things there. I salvaged all this material at considerable expense, shipping it from the bindery up to Michigan for the purpose of kids and schools and so forth. And I also do presentations as well. I've got 2 of them lined up, in fact, this month, and then I do them for school kids as well, too. So,
Excellent. And how can people contact you?
website is one, and then my email address is jlw@michiganlighthouse.com, and that's also up on the website, www.michiganlighthouse.com.
Very good. Again, the book is Michigan Lighthouses. It is a beautiful photographic book of the lighthouses in and around Michigan. And if you would like a copy to check out, you can certainly visit the East Lansing Public Library. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Christian, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
You have been listening to The Director's Cut, an East Lansing Public Library podcast.